Welcome back to the BetCanada channel. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. Today we're sitting down with Jarrett Bailey. He is the managing editor of Behind the Steel Curtain over on SB Nation. Of course, your Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Jarrett, I guess we'll just jump right in, with both feet. Certainly it was the spring into the summer. It was like, they don't know who the quarterback is, but you knew who the quarterback was. Obviously, it was certainly exemplified by the moves that the Steelers necessarily weren't making. And, with bringing Aaron in here now, and, we have several quarterbacks in this league kind of in the same, scenario, maybe a Russ Wilson and certainly a Joe Flacco. Certainly, probably neither were playing to the level of Aaron Rodgers right now. But it gets you into this scenario where you're an all in now team, but yet you look into the future and understand that there, maybe can be a tad bit of an abyss because there's definitely a ticking clock on the guy under center.
Yeah, I mean, if you would have told me after week one though that Aaron Rodgers would be leading the NFL in touchdown passes, I mean, sign me up. I also would have expected it to be like a 34-10 win, not a 34-32 win. Um, but I'm, one game in, I like what I see thus far. And yeah, you brought up other guys who might be in his similar shoes. Russell Wilson just went 17 of 37, and the Giants failed to score a touchdown. Flacco played fine, but there's a very low ceiling what the Browns are going to be able to do this season. Just the lack of talent that they have on the roster. Yeah, in terms of what Aaron and his ceiling is he going to be 2020 Aaron Rodgers and throw 48 touchdowns? I highly, highly doubt it. Um, but in terms of the floor, I think the floor for him is much higher than what we saw last year with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields in Pittsburgh, which they still ended up being a team that won 10 games, got the sixth seed in the AFC playoffs. And if Rodgers can sustain a consistent level of play in which he is a greater good rather than taking away from what the Steelers are doing, then yeah, that should count for one additional win and maybe put them in position to have the 5 seed, or depending on what Baltimore and Cincinnati do, maybe win the division, depending on how the cookie crumbles.
And, as far as the teams and quarterbacks and the other similar situations, Brian Daboll, if your job is on the line, if you're going to go down with the rookie.
Mm.
Just go down with the rookie. Now, the for me, the takeaway from Pittsburgh on Sunday. And I guess if Aaron was going to play like he did, obviously, and you mentioned by the score, etcetera, there were some things that maybe didn't look totally Pittsburgh Steeler-ish. One, a running game of only 2.7, yards per carry. The transition was made certainly, from who had been the lead bell cow for, 4 years in Pittsburgh. I never really had an issue whatsoever with, them handling Warren and extending Warren. In my time with the, covering the Browns and covering, it was always Warren that probably scared the daylights out of me,
Mhm.
just because, when it's him, it was chunk play. Harris was more just kind of like, the hammer and the nail. You knew what it was going to be. Um, but I also believe that, Warren is not the sole feature here. Certainly, Caleb was, drafted here probably to be a part of this answer. But, to see a Pittsburgh Steelers offense in any game whatsoever with only 2.7 yards per carry certainly, was something that probably caught the eye.
Yeah, and it was weird the way they went about it too, because Kenneth Gainwell was the feature runner throughout the first half. Jalen Warren ended up with 11 carries. Gainwell had 7, but couldn't really get anything going. Caleb Johnson had 1 carry in this game, which I totally expected there to be a low workload for him to start the season, and then progressively more would be put on his plate. He was the starting kick returner for them in the game as well. So it feels like they're trying to find ways to get him the ball and keep him involved without making him the feature runner right away. But yeah, the lack of run game was concerning. Luckily, the pass game made up for it, and I thought Arthur Smith called a really good game in terms of being able to put together a melting pot of all different things that he likes to do, but also the different things that Aaron Rodgers likes to do. Where there was a lot of screen passes and short, just get the ball out of your hands, rely on your pass catchers to get some extra yards. There was a little bit of trickery in the red zone with Jonnu Smith, and it turned out to work and got them in the end zone. But also, like, a good amount of deep shots dialed up where Aaron can still throw as good a deep ball as anybody in the league. And, calling as many as they did put them in position to win. Calvin Austin had multiple deep catches, and that set them up for success on multiple occasions. So I thought that Arthur Smith did a really good job of just blending everything that he likes to do, everything that Aaron Rodgers likes to do. And it came together really well. They had a really good day off play action. Aaron threw 3 touchdown passes off play action in the game. So overall, I think Arthur Smith deserves a lot of credit for how he called the game. Aaron deserves a lot of credit for how he, dished out the ball, made a few adjustments at the line of scrimmage at key moments that ended up helping out Pittsburgh. So the run game is a concern. The defense was a concern as well. But I'm happy to be talking about a game in which they won that was a shootout rather than talking about the same game I've talked about for 3 years where it's like, oh, the offense didn't look good, but they won, 16-10. I'm very happy to be saying, yeah, the defense can improve, but we know the offense can put up points if need be.
Yeah, because I mean, especially within the AFC, I mean, if you're talking legitimately about having any opportunity of, contending with the Baltimores of the world, the Kansas Cities, the Buffaloes, you've got to put points on the board. I mean, these teams, we all saw firsthand Sunday night that the Buffalo Bills put up 16 points in 4 minutes.
Mhm.
If that's probably not the standard, but you've got to be able to put up points. And, if you're not a team that can play in the 30s, your chances of going far in the AFC probably suffer. Certainly, some maneuvering within the weaponry and, a quick turnaround, certainly for DK Metcalf as he will, face the old mates this week. Pickens out, Metcalf in. Um, the jokes, the memes, the puns were kind of there all, preseason. And, then once Pickens was moved and, with Aaron being here and your point, of course, I think, with the offense coordinator is people get so stubborn. Aaron's here. He chose you. Look, it's not you're not going to make Aaron bend to you.
Right.
You be the correct way and say, all right, what can I put in that's going to make you comfortable that we can also play off of what I like to do. But DK Metcalf's initial showing here, um, and certainly for DK, when he first signed up here, maybe the thought that was Aaron was a contender for Pittsburgh. I don't know if it was necessarily a slam dunk, clear and dry that it was going to be him. But, you got DK and probably gonna have his eyes, pretty, wide open here for Sunday.
Yeah, and look, he had a good game on Sunday against the Jets. Didn't reach the end zone, which, if you'd have told me Aaron's going to throw 4 touchdown passes and none of them would be to DK, I mean, that's would have made a lot of people go, yeah, probably not. But 4 catches on Sunday, 3 of them were incredibly crucial. On the first drive, he had a third down catch that set them up for the touchdown to Ben Skoranek. Later on, he had took a screen pass 31 yards down the sideline that set him up for a field goal. And then on the game-winning drive, he catches that wild batted around ball for a first down, and then Boswell kicks the game winner. So 4 catches, but 3 of them all led to points. So it was good to see him do stuff that wasn't just, okay, run a 9 route and we'll throw it up to you. Like he was, getting a lot of yak. He was evading defenders, doing stuff in the horizontal game, which isn't necessarily like his known bag. But to see him do that, that's also a good sign, knowing that they're trying to do things with DK rather than just make him a one-trick pony. So I'm excited to see what it looks like against Seattle, though, because this is a team that, from Sunday's showings at least, they're not as good as what the Jets put on the field. Defensively, they did a lot of good stuff against San Francisco, but offensively, man, there's just not a lot there. So I'm excited to see what it looks like against Seattle, and hopefully DK can, have a big game against his former team.
And look, we'd be remiss if we didn't, obviously, you talked about the offense and, so many times over the years talking about, basically, the equivalent of what a freshman high school score would come out of a 16, 13,
Mhm.
17, 14, etc. They give up 32. But you look at, a couple of moves, Jalen Ramsey brought in, Jabril Peppers, moves that maybe 3, 4 seasons ago would have just absolutely lit up social media. Both players still quality, maybe not what they once were in their prime. Certainly not the standard of what the expectation is of a Pittsburgh Steelers defense. But some thoughts on Sunday and where you can see this unit maturing, growing together as the weeks and months come.
Yeah, I mean, the run defense was the biggest thing for me. I mean, Justin Fields, Brees Hall, Braylon Allen. I mean, they just ran it up and down the field all afternoon. which set up things for Justin Fields to be able to do in the pass game, where he threw a beautiful touchdown to Garrett Wilson early in the game, and he just Wilson just cooked Darius Slay. But yeah, the front seven
Okay.
was the biggest thing for me. Keanu Benton didn't have a good game; he was pushed around all afternoon. They just couldn't seem to consistently get to Jets runners, and that led to a really nice balance and played into the Jets' hands of what they want to do. They don't want to throw the ball 35 times a game. If they can run the ball, play the, control the clock game, and set up passes in that regard, then they're going to do that. And, credit to Aaron Glenn and Tanner Angstrain and the Jets. Like, there's no such thing as moral victories in the NFL, but that's the closest thing to a moral victory you can get is, hey, you put up 32 points with a brand new offense, a new quarterback. Those are things that you can walk away with saying there's something to build off there. For Pittsburgh, again, I'd rather be sitting here talking about a defense that's full of stars that didn't play their best game. And if I had to guess, probably won't have a game that poor again. I mean, it was a bad game. So I'd rather be sitting here talking about a defense that is full of stars but can improve, and likely will improve, rather than talking about an offense that struggled and came out of the gates cold. So I think they're in a fine spot. It's week one; they'll make the necessary adjustments, and they're playing a Seattle offense that I think they can improve against because there's just not a lot of stars on that side of the ball for the Seahawks. So this will be a good, hopefully, get right game for the defense.
Okay, now just one last one. The Jabril Peppers, is this a specific need, or is this a guy, with a lot of experience, a lot of versatility, where you can say, "Hey, we can find 2, 3 different things that he can do for us," or was the safety position maybe lacking? I know there's an injury there now as well. Is this maybe the case of just, making a unit stronger, or, did the injury maybe, tip the scale to maybe getting something like this done?
Yeah, I mean, Mike Tomlin was asked about just very bluntly, like, "Hey, did you bring in Jabril because of the injury to Deshaun Elliott?" To which he said, "Yes." But the thing is, when Deshaun Elliott gets back, Jabril Peppers still a good safety,
Exactly.
and then you have depth there where it's Deshaun Elliott, Jabril Peppers, and Juan Thornhill, who I mean, that's a pretty good trio of safeties that you can work with. And then you can stash either Chuck Clark on the practice squad, figure out what you want to do there, but it helps them in terms of what they can do with their defensive backs because Jalen Ramsey, played outside slot safety, like they moved him all over the place. It only adds to the different places that you can put all these chess pieces on the defensive side of the ball when you have versatile pieces like that. So right now it feels a need because Deshaun Elliott's hurt, but when Deshaun Elliott gets back, I mean, it's only going to make that unit better as a whole. So love the move for a variety of reasons, and I think it's only going to make them better.
Yeah, and, Jabril Peppers, and it's been this way his entire career, is he's not a tell on defense. I mean, you
Mhm.
can put him out there, and it's really difficult to know exactly what his defined role is. I mean, here's a guy we saw, in his time, he was a five-star recruit as a cornerback position, safety, linebacker, all these things he can kinda do and just be the hybrid defender that every defensive coordinator, will basically always stick up for and always demand for. You can always find a roster spot for those guys. Pittsburgh Steelers start 1-0, home opener Sunday against the Seattle Seahawks. He is Jarrett Bailey. He is the managing editor of Behind the Steel Curtain over on SB Nation. Make sure you guys all check it out. This has been Jeff Lloyd. We were joined by Jarrett Bailey on the Bet Canada channel. Please like, leave some comments, and of course,